Hello internet, and today's video is going to be another book opinion, those videos in which I tell you my opinion on a book, and today's book is going to be Wink Poppy Midnight by Genevieve Tucholke. And this was a great book. I know that most people, if you've heard about this book, most people don't like it. They're just so on it. It's a very meh book. And when I read it, I thought it was going to be much of the same. I bought this book because the cover is absolutely stunning. And then I heard from several people it was like, oh, it's just okay. It's not really that great. And then I didn't really expect much of it. So then I read the book and I actually ended up really enjoying it. So take it as you will. Know that as far as I'm aware, a majority of people don't like this book, but I find it entertaining. So this book is about three people, two girls and one boy, and one summer, and how all of their stories are combined together. And it's really just this kind of story about stories. It's about telling a good story. It's about getting that good plot, getting those climaxes in there, getting some events, something that will keep your reader entertained, that will keep the characters interested, will keep them intrigued in the story. And it just tells how all three of these characters, how their lives intertwine, how they affect each other, so on and so forth. I am sort of unclear on whether or not this book is a contemporary book or an urban fantasy. While the world itself seems contemporary, it talks about Alabama and Europe and places like that, the feeling of it gives a more fairy tale-ish feeling, like the world that these three kids live in is outside of the contemporary realm. So it kind of gives you a mixed feeling where you're like, this is a contemporary, but it just feels like a story being told to you, so it doesn't really fit into the traditional contemporary category. So this book, the reason why I liked it so much was because it really felt like I was being told a story, and that seems really weird, but it didn't feel so much as a novel as it felt like I was meeting three characters who were going to be told this story of how their fates intertwine, of how they affect each other, of the lies and truths and all these things that they're going to tell each other, of us trying to figure out why they fit together, what's the backstory, what's the history. It didn't feel so much like a novel of me getting to know these characters, but more so a story that I was being told about these characters. And I know that sounds really confusing, but it's just a distinction in my mind where I was so entertained because I was being told this story, but it wasn't so much I was like diving into their lives. Another thing that I really liked about this book was that every character that you meet has some really major flaws that made me dislike a lot of them. And from the beginning of the book, I had like assumptions and feelings about certain characters and other characters. And slowly, as I learned more about the story, I realized it's not that great to make assumptions the way you do. Even if they're right, sometimes you need to acknowledge there's a deeper story going on and things are being twisted so you can only see it in one way. I feel like this story was really just showing you how easily it is to twist a story for your own purposes, and it's very easy for you as the reader to fall into these pit holes that a storyteller puts before you, to fall into these assumptions. But it's more important that you keep your eyes open, that you don't just fall into assumptions, you don't just fall into emotional pits, and you instead analyze what's going on around you and try to observe and deduct what's going on in this story. So this plot is sort of like, I don't know how to explain this plot. I mean, the book itself doesn't do much to explain in the synopsis. It says every story needs a hero, every story needs a villain, every story needs a secret. Wink Poppy Midnight, two girls, one boy, one summer, one bad thing. What really happens? Someone knows, someone is lying. But the real point of this plot is every story. This is a story that someone is trying to tell you, and you gotta keep up with it so that you are not being guided by the storyteller to feel certain things, but you're actually paying attention to the underlying plot. While I don't think this book is like unpredictable in the way that it's shaping this story, I did find it very fascinating, very entertaining. I love being told a good story. I like having a good storyteller to tell me stories. So I ended up enjoying this book. I think the reason why was because I just went into it without any real expectations. And when I came out, I absolutely loved it. I do think that it's more for a person who likes stories to be told you, who likes a storytelling aspect rather than wanting a novel, because I don't know how to say this, but this book doesn't really read as a traditional novel, but reads more like a story that you're being told, and you're slowly starting to figure out which parts are pure fiction, which parts are set up, and which parts are the reality of what's going on in the world and what's going on with these characters. So Wing Poppy Midnight, to me, was a really good book. It was a book I enjoyed. It was a book that I liked. I liked seeing all three characters. I liked seeing their perspectives. I liked getting to know them, even though I really didn't like most of them, and my opinions about them changed off and on based on whatever information I was given. But it's a really short book. I like stories, so I like when a story tells me a story, and that's why I like this book. But I can't really say go out and go buy it, because I'm not quite sure how people will enjoy this book, given that a majority of people that I have heard talk about this book don't tend to rate this book highly, but just say it's okay in their opinion. Take that as you will, take my opinions as you will, but just know that I had a good time. So that's all that really matters to me, is that I enjoyed myself. Now, if you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those bunnies down below, and goodbye, internet.